The earth dries up and it withers. The world languishes and withers. The heavens languish together with the earth. The earth lies polluted under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed laws, violated statutes, broken an everlasting covenant. A curse devours the land, its inhabitants suffer. The wine dries up, the vine languishes, and all the merry-hearted sigh. No longer do they drink wine with singing. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink of it. The city of chaos is broken down. Desolation is left. The gates are battered into ruins. For thus it shall be on earth and among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as at the gleaning, when the grape harvest is ended.
But on that day, a pleasant vineyard, sing about it. I, the Lord, am its keeper. Every moment I water it. I guard it day and night so that no harm will come to it. I have no wrath. If it gives me thorns and briars, I will march to battle against it. I will burn it up. Or else let it cling to me for protection. Let it make peace with me. Let it make peace with me. In days to come, Jacob shall take root, Israel shall blossom and put forth shoots and fill the whole world with fruit. There is a vision that God has been attempting to work out for centuries. A vineyard ripe for the harvest. A symbiotic network of mutually dependent relationships, not competing for dominance, but each playing their role and working together to cultivate the perfect environment, to produce mound upon mound of luscious, fruiting berries. A vineyard was God's vision. At least that's how Isaiah imagined it. Any experienced farmer would tell you that it takes a certain level of care and self-denial to cultivate the vital relationships that make up a flourishing garden. Seen and unseen birds, bugs, bacteria, and broken minerals, even the farmer, all work together to create a delicate balance of giving and taking. A balance that is integral to making a life in the soil take root. When this give and take ecosystem gets knocked out of balance, it undoubtedly alters what is harvested there. Isaiah uses a great deal of agricultural imagery to paint a picture for the Israelites of the communal and ecological disaster facing them. Enemies invading, displaced from their land, field and financial stability burned to the ground. Isaiah's words force them to come face to face with how far their choices have led them from God's vision of a harvest. The metaphorical image of Isaiah's vineyard gets to the heart of the very literal fact that when God created life to be dependent upon one another, God made it so that we each play a role in our collective flourishing or withering. Jesus had these texts from Isaiah, this vision from Isaiah in mind when he sent 70 disciples out into fields, 2 by 2, with the task to bring peace to a world and reap a plentiful harvest. The broken, the hungry, the violence, the oppressed scattered around them were all evidence of people and systems that had turned a blind eye to humanity's collective responsibility for life. And Jesus was calling their attention to it. When we read Jesus' words for this week of an abundant harvest, or Isaiah's words of a plentiful vineyard, some of us may not be able to help but wonder, perhaps even as the disciples might have wondered, where? The laborers are few part, that we certainly feel as a church. But where is the harvest? Is anything really ripe for the picking? Church numbers are down. Nuns, or people who claim to have no denominational affiliation, are the largest growing population of young people today. In our postmodern age, everyone has their own definition of what it means to be spiritual. Further than that, violence and domination seem to prevail. We live in a culture where an anything-goes mentality has been contrived in how we speak of our neighbors. Foreigners are villainized and feared. Ecosystems are destroyed for making way for more stuff and more money and more power. Young men are shot. Women are trafficked for sex. We cheat and lie our way through the world. Perhaps, like the Israelites in Isaiah, we can resonate deeply with the prophet's words. The earth dries up and withers. The world languishes and withers. When Jesus sent his disciples out into the fields, he didn't just send them out to collect an already flourishing harvest, or spend time in a world of individuals who were particularly good at giving instead of taking. In fact, Jesus warned his disciples that this work would be hard, that sometimes their hands would get blistered and their shoes would get dusty, and still people would be left wanting. When Jesus sent the disciples out that day, he said to them, "Whatever house you enter into, first say, 'Peace to this house.' And if anyone is there who shares in peace, your peace will rest on that person." The very first mission that Jesus gave to his disciples was to make peace. When we think of peace in our culture, we think of an end to war, or we think of no fighting. But the word peace in Scripture has an even deeper, much richer meaning. The word peace in Greek is eirene. And its most basic meaning is, in fact, a state of rest, or an end to civil war. But when the Greeks rewrote the Hebrew Scriptures in a language that they could understand, they used this word eirene when they translated the Hebrew word for peace, which was shalom. And shalom was more than a state of civil rest, though it often included that. Shalom could be translated as the normal state of all things, or the way that this creation was intended to function. Shalom meant the healing and restoring of relationship, not limited to God, not limited to one another, but all of life. Shalom was the recognition that all God's creatures work together to maintain a delicate balance of the life that we all share, and without one, we would crumble. Shalom meant things like caring for a whole person. Not just their spirits, but their bodies and their minds too. Shalom wasn't limited to people even, because shalom recognized that our lives depend on a lot of other little lives. Lesser lives, as we've come to term them in a human-dominated world. So when Jesus, a Hebrew man and a rabbi, used this word peace, he was talking about shalom. Jesus was calling his disciples to make shalom. It's why when they entered a house, Jesus commanded that they eat with those who lived there. That Jesus heal them and teach them. It's why when Jesus told his disciples to pick a house, when they went into town, he told them to pick a house and stay there, not to move from place to place, to eat and heal and live and breathe with the people that they were coming into contact with. Jesus didn't ask his disciples to show up, tell people about Jesus, and get out. In fact, he usually didn't command them to tell others about himself at all. Most of the time, he asked the disciples not to tell others about Jesus. Instead, he called them to do life with people, to stick their hands in the dirt, to cultivate relationships so that shalom might grow. To show with their actions, and not so much their words, that peace is possible. The disciples had to work for the harvest. They weren't called to put on their gloves and go out into a garden to pluck beautifully grown berries that somebody else worked for. They were laborers. They were called to go out into the fields to till the soil, to pour their blood, sweat, and tears onto the earth, planting seeds of shalom, and then praying to God for rain so that something might grow. In the church, we have this mistaken idea that fulfilling the mission God gives to us, a mission to bring peace to the world, basically amounts to telling others about Jesus and then praying as we walk away that they might respond. We have this mistaken idea that the salvation Jesus talked about is really as small as an individual saying yes to a set of beliefs and adopting a new Sunday morning routine. And that our role in this salvation extends only as far as reciting our own beliefs with some conviction. You and I both know that when we adopt that role, it often leaves us wondering what's wrong with the other person or that other generation who just doesn't seem to be responding to what we're offering. Don't get me wrong, our beliefs are important. Jesus is important, but the portrait that Jesus himself paints of salvation is a far fuller vision. And we play a much more active role in it. Jesus is calling his disciples to do life with people, to work for shalom. This means seeing one another, not as a soul who needs saving, but as a whole person who needs saving. A whole person that is filled with the physical and the mental and the emotional, and we are called to care for that. To work for someone's whole well-being. Shalom means remembering that though we may currently sit as human beings at the top of the food chain, there are living beings that feed us and sustain us, who deserve our care and our companionship, lest they won't be alive one day. For Jesus, making peace meant working for the restoration of whole communities. Peace looks like hungry bellies now full, widows no longer alone, orphans finally hearing the words, "I love you," for the first time. Peace looks like the alienated being grafted back onto the communal body. A person not being semblance of peace in this chaotic world that we inhabit. We walk through those doors and we sit in these pews, and something about it recenters us. It reminds us of what's important and what's not. But what we do in here, the peace we find in here, cannot be disconnected from what we do out there and the peace we find out there. What we find in here is not for us to keep, it is to be shared. Because participating in God's saving grace means fighting for peace in a world where peace is often not found. As we consider this month and next month where it is that God is calling us to go as a congregation, when we consider what it means to extend our hearts deeper and our hands wider and further out into this world, we must remember that, like the disciples, our first mission is to go out and make shalom. We have been given a blueprint for the neighborhoods around us, a blueprint of a holy vineyard, a harvest that we are invited to reap once it's been grown, of neighbors making peace instead of violence with neighbors, of people in our county who are hungry or feel disregarded or who find themselves utterly alone, finally finding the sustenance they need to do life better. We are being called as a community to fight for God's shalom. And that may sound like a big job. It might overwhelm us. We're just a few people. But God is not calling us to save the entire world. God is calling us to get strategic. God is calling us to help make peace in a few key places that touch down in our lives. And if we do, if we go out into these key places and we take seriously our mission to make peace with the Creator and the created, there will be no doubt that God's Spirit is moving. There will be no doubt that salvation will abound in the lives of the people and places in our time. And that Isaiah's dream of a holy vineyard is possible, may even begin to take root now. On that day, a pleasant vineyard. Sing about it. I, the Lord, am its keeper. Every moment I water it. I guard it day and night so that no one would harm it. I have no wrath. If it gives me briars and thorns, I will battle against it. I will burn it up. Or else let it cling to me for protection. Let it make peace with me. Let it make peace